I would like first of all thank you very much that we have this opportunity to exchange with our knowledge here in this really nice crowd. So thank you, Marlon, and for organizing this fascinating event. What I'm going to do today is to share with my new research project, which was very kindly supported by the program here in George Washington University by providing funding for the field research and research. So that's why I'm again grateful. So I would like to share some preliminary thoughts after my fieldwork experiences, where I was trying to look at migration and Central Asian migrants in Russia, and how the mosque, what is the role of mosques in integrating migrants in Russia. And today I will just focus on one aspect of my research, which is female Muslim entrepreneurs who are really, some of them are really successful in doing economic activities of different kind, not necessarily halal businesses. We are also looking with, my colleague will speak later about halal businesses in Russia. So we are also focusing on halal businesses, but today I would like to, in this presentation, I would like to focus more on female entrepreneurs. Well, as I said, this is very much preliminary thinking about my informants in the field. I already wrote a couple of articles dealing with entrepreneurship and informal economies in general, where I more deal with these topics on a more theoretical level, but this piece is not yet that far. It's still in a draft version of highlighting some more important aspects which really came to my mind. So any feedback, any comments and questions are really welcome, which could improve the piece. So as I said in the paper, I would like today to focus on how entrepreneurs navigate through different kind of spaces, and what is and I would like to give a little bit of their perspective and how they deal with the challenges of being Muslim and an entrepreneur at the same time. So I will just try to highlight the aspects which are dealing with the gendered spaces and gendered matters which are relevant to the entrepreneurs that I'm looking at. So that's why these outside female entrepreneurs, I will come to that later in my presentation. So I did research mainly based in Moscow and some small research in Perm. Moscow is the capital of Russia, so it's a cosmopolitan city. So what kind of context we are talking about in Moscow, and unlike the context that we have already seen today in the morning, where we have Dubai and Kazakhstan or Central Asia, I mean, these are very different contexts or different situations or urban spaces similarly. These are very different also state regimes there, but still from the presentations and from my very limited knowledge about this context, they have a lot of similarities in terms of dealing with non-Muslims and dealing with other migrants, dealing with other institutions, questioning always these terms of purity and dirtiness and class questions, and all these hierarchies are really coming also in this context, which can be also compared to what we've heard today. So what we have in Russia, we have en masse migration from Central Asia to Russia. So the Muslims are in millions in Russia, and in Moscow there are about, I mean, my colleague is very conservative about numbers, I'm also, so I will just drop any number, like about like 4 million Muslims maybe. So what we have this kind of isolated residence patterns and xenophobia, of course. Strict registration regulations, which really throw a lot of migrants into informality and informal practices or informal economies and documentation. So, and any integration infrastructures are really missing there. I mean, social welfare, I mean, there are very limited foundations and some other clubs which are organized a little bit for Muslims, but there are not a real infrastructure which could really accommodate the migrants in Russia. Well, context relevant for specifically for women is like, if you look at the, as I said, these kind of residence patterns. So living conditions, space, in terms of space, I mean, when you have this резиновые квартиры, where in one room there are mixed number of, I mean, the number is 15, from 10 to 15 people living in one room, and in mixed men and women living in the next to each other, because the mattresses are laying really next to each other. So a little bit of space I've seen in some of the situations where women, practicing Muslim women were living. And of course then the questions of hygiene, privacy, gender roles are also relevant here. With living within the families, outside families. I mean, in Moscow, even if you have of course, you see of course that the families organize their residential arrangements a little bit, that the families live together and etc. But you have both. So the family structures and family relations is very relevant also in Moscow. And what I'm talking about, that they have the double burden, because I think what we heard about these entrepreneurs who were mainly male entrepreneurs, I think there is some differences in challenges, and which is connected to the roles in the status in the families and their communities. That's why what I say, it's maybe even double or multiple burdens which female entrepreneurs have to face. So what are the relevant issues which are connected to these women is, of course, the way how they dress. If they, I mean, I've seen very different women who were very actively involved in different economic activities, from business women. They call themselves "we are businessmen." We already heard about this very particular category of business. We are not migrants, we are business. So you have also very much active religious entrepreneurs who really are successful with practicing religion and being a proper Muslim, and having an authority, for example, in teaching in informal religious schools, and having an authority of spreading a word about Islam. So I mean, you have different things. So I mean, these women who are business-like dressed, coming to mosque and putting their scarves on, they have certain kinds of strategies, beliefs, style of working. I mean, their belief is that if they go to mosque and give the sadaqah, their business will be blessed. We already heard about that as well. So barakah, and very important, sadaqah is very important. When the business is bigger, zakat is important, etc. But you also see other kinds of entrepreneurs who are they call themselves normal migrants, but come to mosque to network and sell some products, by the way, and where the role of Islam is more about trust and being able to trust someone in such a setting. The mosques that I was looking at, this is a very big mosque in Moscow, which has much more space to offer. And I was spending a lot of time in this mosque because the women's part of this mosque is much more spacious and much more accommodating women than the other ones that I saw, that I was also visiting, which is Исторический Mosque, which is much smaller. And in this mosque, you have much more diverse attendees, and female, especially the female with children, are very much find themselves very accommodated there, because the children can play in this kind of very spacious rooms which are available in the female part of the mosque. Whereas, for example, in the other mosque, they have a very small room without windows and not very nice, and you also see, of course, much more attendance from Central Asian migrants, because obviously it's big enough to accommodate more people. So if I just give some glimpse to the part where I was spending most of my research time, you can see that how spacious and how accommodating and how comfortable this space is, which is provided for female attendees, where they can, I mean, if you look at how they sit within the mosque, that they can discuss, they can network, they can even sell some things there, and they can connect, and they also form different circles, like this, for example. It's of course always a little bit of ethnically divided because of the language and etc. So in this, I'm saying that some of the women which I'm going to provide in this piece, that I titled it "From Mosque to the Business Offices." So the case studies that I would like to include in this piece is about the network of women who are trading, selling cosmetic products. And they explained me that they come to Mosque to gain more clients, so that to be able to sell more. I will just skip the space, because I wanted to show the office of the women. So I mean, not to judge on morality, but I think I would like to bring in this paper that besides all these constraints and all this context that I'm describing, which is not very simple in this Moscow kind of context, I will show other pictures as well for the traders who are outside of the mosques, which are not necessarily having this kind of very nice offices, but still, it's still, even with the better or best conditions of doing business, I think there are these constraints, these barriers, which are related to being Muslim. Still, I think what we see among migrants and especially entrepreneurs is that besides all these constraints and barriers, there is enough agency to innovate and be entrepreneurial and lead different kinds of economic activities, which really speaks what kind of gendered spaces are there, and what kind of role are women playing, Muslim women playing in economies like this. So just to give you some differences in working mode and conditions or situations where these entrepreneurs are doing businesses are really different. Like this kind of office with it's of course not formally registered, but whatever, but they have the offices. So if you look at the trade outside, this is a man, but if you look at the trade outside, is the conditions are not very friendly, especially not in the winter. If you're for example selling bread or somsas or other food stuff, and not only from climate, but also the outside mosques are not protected in terms of police raids, for example, and security situation in general. And for women in general, one of my informants who is involved in several women I have, but one of the women involved in the trade of bread, for example, she stays there with a small child who has to spend the whole day in this cold weather. I was trying to help her to sell the bread with her and entertain her child, but the conditions under which she's working is really, really not women-friendly. So what I want to show here is that it's really situations are different and the constraints are there and differing. So I said about what is the differences of inside and inside, outside and comfort and all different situations. So what are the fields of entrepreneurship where the female Muslims are involved are religious education, religious healing, which is hijama, performed at home. Trade, as I already showed some of them, fortune telling and other services, home conditions of course, religious education, both home education, depending on the contacts and ethnicity. If you have, of course, a connection with the Muftiyat, you could have your nice classes within the mosque. If not, then at home. So these are the spheres the women involved in. So as I said, I have no theory yet, but I see the paradox of being a devout Muslim when you interpret it as a proper Muslim. We already heard about how Aurel brought some examples from his family of this businessman who kept their women in the house. So religion and female entrepreneurship not always go along together. If you look at the very strict female participation in public spaces. So I see also this different survival strategies and coping strategies which are employed by these Muslim women, which at times have really contradictory relation with their piety and practices. So I also see that there are also moral pressures around, for example, when it comes to this business-like women, or when they come like in a very short skirts and putting scarves on their head, or if they're selling not a very always not very healthy products, saying that it will cure you from all kinds of diseases, but which is, I mean, lies, which you are not allowed to do, I think, in Islam. So, I mean, these kind of details really create moral pressures, I guess. And of course, we already discussed that, starting with from the morning, that it's always the question which appears obviously as a dilemma is rationality versus morality and spirituality. So that's always the question. Are you rational enough to make profits? And are you still a proper Muslim and being halal? So we, in our research, also dealing with this dilemma, thinking about rationality and spirituality. So that's my preliminary thought, and no theory, as I said, but I would like to hear really feedback and maybe more references that I should look into. But thank you very much for your attention.